Hello and welcome to another spookily authentic and incredibly photogenic episode of What Happened, the show that turns its lens to video games and movies with horribly haunted productions. That's 2 photography references in the opening 10 seconds there, people. Do try to keep up. With that said, this week we'll be roaming the creepy, ghost-filled hallways of the Fatal Frame franchise, and more specifically, the most troubled and least played entry, Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, or just Fatal Frame 4 if you want to keep this nice and short. Now, if you're like me, and I know I am, you're a massive coward, so to shed some light on this particularly cursed game in the series, I've enlisted Rad of House Nitro to help me navigate this terrifying land of wind and ghosts.
Which I've actually had quite a bit of experience in. Thanks for having me on, Matthew.
Don't call me that! Anyway, I can hear some of you scratching your heads out there. If you've never heard of Fatal Frame 4, there's a good reason. It's the only entry in the entire franchise that has never left Japan, and the reasons for this are varied and mysteriously mysterious. What we do know is that it comes down to a veritable war of words between Nintendo and Koei Tecmo, which are the co-owners of the IP. Well, they were the co-owners of the IP until I don't know, a few months ago. Anyway, they didn't get along too well on this project, and Suda51's Grasshopper manufacturer wound up being stuck in the middle, and we all lost in the end. So grab the camera obscura, put on your cutest outfit, and rev up your little girl trot! It's time to find out what happened with Fatal Frame 4.
A ghost?
It's 2005, and the third entry in the series, The Tormented, or Zero, voice of the tattoo in Japan, is met with somewhat of a muted response in its home country, selling an approximate 54,000 copies when all was said and done. Nintendo was busy courting developers for the upcoming Wii. With the plateauing sales of the last entry on the PS2, Tecmo decided to shack up with Nintendo, who took a vested interest in the Fatal Frame franchise, co-funding future entries as long as they stayed exclusive to their hardware. It was an easy choice to make at the time. Some of the financial burden of development and marketing is taken off of Tecmo, and their franchise gets exposed to a whole new demographic. The problem is that there were 2 brand new console launches coming up, the Wii and the PS Triple Ballin', while it left Tecmo with not a whole lot of staff to throw at Fatal Frame, thus they sought out a smaller studio to help co-develop. They landed on the aforementioned Grasshopper manufacturer, who had already put out a number of horror-adjacent games, none more famous and or baffling than Michigan Report from Hell. No, I won't stop talking about this.
Oh my god!
Seriously though, Goichi Suda's work on Killer 7 is what most likely caught Tecmo and series creator Makoto Shibata's eye. The game's unsettling atmosphere, dialogue, and its mix of third-person exploration and first-person combat was a perfect fit for Fatal Frame. Tecmo made Suda an offer, several offers in fact, to co-direct and write the new chapter in the Camera Obscura's history. And of course, Suda said no. Seriously, like this is actually just my favorite aspect to this whole story. Yo, do you want to help us make a new entry in this well-regarded franchise? Yeah, no, I'm good, actually. Okay, well, what Suda actually said when asked why he initially turned it down was, I don't like horror games. There's a very small chance I'll make horror games in the future. You see, the director, Makoto Shibata, can see real ghosts. When he makes Fatal Frame, he simulates a real ghost experience like in the game. I don't want to make a game like that. When he found out that they were targeting the Wii, however, he decided that would at least be interesting and provide opportunities to do something fresh. So he signed on the dotted line.
In blood, no doubt.
One small issue though, he needed to finish No More Heroes first, which he was set to direct at the time. If everything had gone without a hitch, Fatal Frame 4 might have wound up releasing on the Wii much closer to its original launch rather than a year and a half later. Now, you'd think a two-way development dynamic plus Nintendo looking over everyone's shoulder would make for a complicated life cycle, but that doesn't seem to be the case. From what I could dig up, things went relatively smoothly between Grasshopper and Shibata's teams, although perhaps not every choice they made was for the best. The game was set to be a prequel to the very first Fatal Frame, taking place some 10 years previous, but like all entries in the series, the story was meant to be standalone. Both teams sought to change up the formula as much as possible, but without deviating from what players expected. The camera was brought in much closer and ditched a lot of the static angles that harkened back to early survival horror games, which in turn made for a much more intimate setting. A new system was also implemented that would help players hone in on the location of items, with a meter that would glow brighter the closer you got to something important. When reaching out for said items, the camera would now cut to a cinematic angle to make sure you got the best view in case you triggered the whatever % chance that a ghostly hand will give you a big frighten. A divisive choice to be sure, but it was good for a scare or two. Just maybe not like 30 scares in a row when you're hours into the game. But if you want to talk divisive, there's no better example than Fatal Frame 4's control scheme, which has to be one of its most contentious aspects. Now, if you have the Wii Remote and Nunchuck in your hand and your in-game avatar has some type of item like a gun or say a flashlight or camera, how do you visualize that item being controlled? If you said, well, you wave the remote around and the IR sensor detects a crosshair or focal point, leading to a fluid feeling of movement. Whoa there, nerd. Let me stop you right there to tell you just how wrong you are. Despite numerous light gun games, first-person shooters, or even other survival horror titles on the Wii, Fatal Frame 4 tried to do something different. When I say different, I mean clumsy and awkward. Moving the control stick left and right steers your character and thus their hand, while tilting the Wii Remote slightly up or down, which uses the motion-sensing gyros and not the IR sensor, controls your flashlight vertically. This is incredibly slow and cumbersome and just feels wrong when you're holding an object in your hand that's shaped like the object you're holding in the game. Now, throughout every interview I could find, there hasn't been a 100% crystal clear reason as to why they felt this control scheme should be the only one available. Longtime series producer Keisuke Kikuchi did touch upon it in a Japanese interview. The flashlight, which illuminates the dark rooms, is an item that is essential for further raising the feeling of fear. And when I saw the Wii Remote for the first time, I felt that it was a really good fit. From there, as a result of much trial and error, we decided not to use pointing, but rather the motion sensor, raising and lowering the remote, which I thought was the most realistic way of control, like you were really holding an actual light. Moreover, the feeling of operating it using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, holding a controller in both hands, had more of a sense of realism than conventional controllers, which adds to the fear. I mean, I guess this is merely my own reasoning here, but I feel they did not go with pointer controls because it simply would have felt too good and responsive. You know how using the IR sensor makes RE4 a cakewalk? You're popping Ganado's heads from across the map and it feels awesome and Leon's the best? That's not what they were going for here. Fatal Frame games are, by design, slow, dread-filled slogs through haunted locations, where things are kept at a deliberate pace to heighten the tension. Kinda like how tank controls are a handicap that ensures that the player can never be too competent in dodging enemies. While I personally respect the team's vision in keeping a particular tone and pace for their horror game intact, not giving players a secondary control option is never the right move. Now, most people weren't even aware a new entry in the Fatal Frame series was being made, and certainly couldn't have predicted Nintendo's involvement until it was formally announced in January of 2008. Unfortunately, by then, Nintendo of America had already made it clear that not all titles greenlit by NCL would actually make it over to Western shores, so fans of the franchise started biting their nails. And it's about here where I'm gonna pass off the flashlight to Nitrous Oxide Radley to take us through what happened next.
That I certainly can do. So back on July 31st of 2008, when Mask of the Lunar Eclipse was first released, it was off to a pretty rough start. Calling the first few weeks sluggish might even be charitable, hovering around only 30,000 copies sold, making it one of the franchise's weaker launches. Fortunately though, like a lot of underrated Wii games, it did have a long tail, eventually settling north of 70,000 copies overall, which was considerably better than Fatal Frame 3 did. While Famitsu seemed to love it, awarding it a 34 out of 40, import reviews from across the internet were, decidedly less kind. Pretty much every major outlet that got their hands on this thing criticized the crap out of that control scheme, and honestly, being somebody who's beat this game myself, I kinda can't help but agree with them. But hey, on the flip side, many did feel the game had a very effective atmosphere and appreciated the small changes that Tecmo and Grasshopper had made to the formula. Unfortunately though, one thing that would sour all of this was that no matter where you played the game, be it in its home country or on a modded Western Wii, bugs would haunt Fatal Frame 4 just as much as the ghosts would. For whatever reason, even if you got a selfie with every ghoul in the game, every bitter banshee, every single shrieking spirit, the ghost checklist would never become complete. It'll top out at only 227 of the 233 possible ghosts. And that's bad enough, but completing the checklist was supposed to unlock the festival lens, so that lens is now completely unobtainable, at least without the use of hacking. If you just so happen to be playing and you decided to go directly to the doctor's lounge without first opening up a safe in the director's office, the game will freeze and lock up every single time. Hope your last save wasn't too far back. There were, of course, numerous other collision issues and exploits throughout, so it was pretty clear that it could have used some additional polish. Perhaps the more complicated nature of dual development between the two teams, or their inexperience with the Wii is what caused these issues, as not being able to complete a checklist is certainly indicative of a rushed product. And patches weren't really a common thing on Wii, so it wasn't like they could update it or anything. The best you could hope for was the bugs maybe getting fixed the next time they print more copies. Unless you were Twilight Princess, of course. I'm sure you remember those weird patch channels you had to download to fix your...
I remember that shit!
Yeah, like I missed downloading an app to fix my game. Those were good times, but anyway, all these bugs caused what had led many to believe was a rift between Nintendo and Tecmo, with the Lunar Eclipse's localization chances being put into the crossfire. This was due to the fact that as the months dragged on, so did Nintendo of America's silence regarding Fatal Frame over in the West. In fact, Reggie Fils-Aimé himself went on the record saying something that just perfectly encapsulated the relationship between NOA and NCL.
I'm not the publisher of that title in the Americas, so I can't comment on it. I don't even know if it has a publisher. What are you asking me for? I'm Reggie. Leave me alone!
But shouldn't you have known, Reggie? I mean, the publisher's kind of the company you work for. This is yet another classic example of both sides of Nintendo not properly communicating with one another, but it probably goes even deeper than that. With so many bugs being documented and criticism against the control scheme all coming out of the press following the Japanese launch, it's very likely Nintendo had spoken to Tecmo about fixing all of these issues before they would consider a Western release. In fact, a number of articles around 2008 and 2009 cited this as the main reason holding the game back, with Tecmo apparently refusing to do so, as they didn't want to pony up for the additional development cost. Likewise, there were also rumblings that despite ordering the fixes to begin with, Nintendo were against paying for them as well, so the whole thing came to a big dumb stalemate with neither company willing to budge.
It would seem we have reached an impasse.
What an absolute non-reason for a game to never get localized, because nobody wanted to pay to fix it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But it fits the narrative because both companies publicly kept putting the onus on the other, hoping fans would simply complain the game into English existence. I mean, check out Tecmo's official response. Nintendo holds the publishing rights to Fatal Frame Wii, which was developed by Tecmo and Grasshopper Manufacture. Nintendo of America has since decided not to publish the title in North America. Consequently, the title will not be released in this territory. As the owner of the IP, Tecmo feels very unfortunate that the fans of the series in North America will not have a chance to play the game, but respects the final decision made by Nintendo of America. Now, we also can't forget the fairly big landmass known as Europe. Official French Nintendo magazines featured Fatal Frame Wii in upcoming release lists and even ran a full-page ad announcing it was coming, to only then retract everything a few weeks later, chalking it up to a printing error.
Yeah, it's almost like Nintendo of Europe accidentally mentioned the shitty uncle or something, and everybody else in the family tells them to zip it.
Right? Wow, that actually hits close to home. So with no resolution coming, fans took it upon themselves to localize the game some 2 years later, which, while not perfect, is literally the only option if you're keen to read dozens of depressing notes left by the dead. What's weird though is that Nintendo and Tecmo's relationship didn't diminish over this, but strengthened. Hell, they had already allowed Zero Suit Samus and Luigi costumes into the game, and only continued to collaborate in the years to come. They then produced Spirit Camera for the 3DS, a Project Zero 2 remake, which did go on to haunt Europe. And of course, Fatal Frame Maiden of Dark Water for the Wii U, which no one played, which is why it's getting released on all modern formats later this month. Hey, how about that? So whatever the deal was, co-bipartisan ownership of the franchise shared between two companies seems to have loosened up, so it's very possible a full HD collection encompassing the entire franchise might be in the cards, and perhaps Mask of the Lunar Eclipse will be available officially in English for the first time ever.
Hey, we can only hope.
Radley,
Don't call me that.
where on the internet do you dwell?
My name is James, and you can find my YouTube videos on...
Excellent. And if you out there know of any other games or movies filled with the spookies that you'd like me to take a look at, let me know in the comments below, over on my Twitter, or take a reasonably paced girl trot over to the Flophouse VIP Patreon and become a big boss to nominate what you'd like to see in the future. See you next time, and thanks for watching.